I'm going to record the meeting as well. We've received some early questions from some residents at various condo developments and other places in Old Town North with some very specific questions about a particular development or arts user. Unfortunately, this is not really the forum to address those. I would encourage you to follow up with, for example, venue. If you're a venue resident, I would encourage you to follow up with your condominium board or your representative for your arts anchor there. Or we can, try to answer your questions separately, but it's not really the goal of this particular session. So I'd also ask that you keep your questions civil. These days, unfortunately, we have to ask people to do that. We're not trying to embarrass anyone here or ask any gotcha questions. This is supposed to be a collaborative discussion to provide updates to everyone in the community about where we are with the Arts and Cultural District and some ideas and strategies we have to move it forward. I think the one thing that probably we can all agree on is that everyone on this call, whether you're a presenter or an attendee, that you want to see the Arts and Cultural District in Old Town North thrive. So I think that's something we can all agree on. So with that said, I'm going to do one shameless plug for an event that the Old Town North Alliance has coming up this Saturday. And we've partnered with the Friends of the Mount Vernon Trail, who are members of the Alliance as well. And there's a cleanup event this Saturday at 501 Slater's right by Marina Towers. And we will be picking up trash and cleaning up the trail, that section of the trail at the very end of Old Town, northern end of Old Town North. And so we'd invite you to sign up. This is hosted by the Friends of Mount Vernon Trail, and hope to have as many residents and members, residents of Old Town North and members of the Old Town North Alliance there joining us to help with this effort. If you're not familiar with the Friends of Mount Vernon Trail, they're a fantastic organization. They work very closely with the Park Service and all the other stakeholders in the trail, all the way up and down its length from Mount Vernon all the way up through Arlington to keep it beautiful and improve it with water fountains and other amenities. So it's a really great group. You should consider supporting them if you're not already familiar with them. But certainly come out on Saturday for a couple hours if you can spare the time on a weekend, and please help out there. It's a very worthy effort. And this is our annual collaboration with them to help clean up the trail. So that's my shameless plug for that. So with that said, let me introduce our panelists. I'll provide a little update on a few projects, and then we'll turn over the discussion to our panelists for some conversation regarding the Arts and Cultural District. So our first panelist is Suzanne Bethel from the Art League. She's the Art League's executive director. The Art League has had a lot going on in the past year or so in particular, and we're excited to have Suzanne with us to talk about that. Jeff Farner is the Deputy Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of Alexandria. Jeff's been instrumental in a number of initiatives related to the small area plan in Old Town North, and I look forward to hearing from Jeff. Austin Holderness is the president of Car Companies. Austin's company is developing 425 Montgomery Street, which is the project that is currently coming out of the ground, now above grade at the corner of Pitt and Montgomery. Pretty excited to see the progress there, and that project will have an arts and cultural anchor located in it, and we're excited to talk to Austin about what's anticipated there very shortly. Dina Stoner is a board member for the National Council for the Traditional Arts, and among the other hats that she wears, Dina has also done quite a bit of research about arts and cultural districts, what's worked, what hasn't worked in other parts of the country. So I'm very interested to hear what Dina has to say about lessons learned that we can take away from other arts and cultural districts around the country. So welcome. Thank you all for making time to be here and chat with us about the exciting progress that we're making. Finally, I know it's long overdue in some cases, but we're finally making progress in the Arts and Cultural District, and I'm excited to talk more about that. And of course, I'm the moderator, Ryan Whitaker. I'm the president of the Old Town North Alliance. I'm also the co-developer of the Tadlock project on Old Town, on North Fairfax Street, and host of this session. I'll provide a little update on Tadlock as well, but want to spend most of the time talking about some of the other exciting things going on in Old Town North.
Ryan, real quick. I'm the Chief Development Officer of Core Properties. I think you got me mixed up with Austin Flazier, who's the president of Core Companies, but it's easy to get us mixed up.
All right, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you for correcting me. That will, I guarantee you that won't be the first or the last
No,
correction.
I get it happens all the
Yeah,
time.
I,
Two Austins at cars, so it's hard.
car
It's easy,
companies, car America, it's very confusing. I don't.
e-
Anyway, thank you.
easy to get us mixed up.
I got the project right though. So
You did. You got the
all
picture.
right. All right. So speaking of that, actually, that was a good segue. We're going to get into some development updates on projects that are pending or currently under construction at at in Old Town North. So Tide Lock, the project that I'm involved with, has two components: 65 residential condominiums called the Residences on the left there in this rendering, and 169 apartments called Current at Tide Lock. Those will be rental apartments. And the residences are currently selling. We just launched sales in the last couple of weeks. So if you're interested, please, I don't have the website memorized. I should, but Google the residences Tide Lock, and I'm sure you will find our website link there if you're interested in a condominium, purchasing one. Those condominiums will be delivered in early April of 2026, so just about 5 months away. Current at Tide Lock, the rental apartment community will develop or will deliver toward the end of April. Again, so about 6 months from now. So we're getting pretty close on those two. Tide Lock does have an arts component. I don't have a current rendering of the arts anchor for this project, but it is 5,000 square feet. We have a pending proposal with an arts anchor for an Italian car museum. There's a second proposal that we're working on. So we have a couple options that we're pursuing here to provide arts and cultural space, uh, right around the time the project opens or shortly thereafter. So we're excited about that. This is a rendering of the retail and arts and culture space. There will be a cafe in about 2,000 square feet, and then the other half will have 1,500 square feet of the arts and cultural anchor, and then the additional portion of that will be located in the ground floor of the apartment building just across the internal driveway. So this is a rendering of that cafe. Moving on to Metro Stage. This is obviously one of the most high profile pending arts and cultural anchors for Old Town North. I have an update from Carolyn Griffin, the artistic director there. Carolyn is excited that they're moving forward with plans to finally open Metro Stage. They've been working with Win Stanley Architects and Quattro Construction, both local Alexandria firms, also consultants on sound, acoustics, theater lighting, architectural lighting, visual artists, performers, and they're excited to hopefully have a grand opening in late 2026. So hopefully that will come to fruition within the next year or so. I know people have been impatiently waiting for this, as it was one of the originally envisioned arts and cultural anchors in the venue condominiums. And we're hopeful that that will come to fruition sooner than later. People have been waiting patiently, and I think we'll all be glad to see when it's completed. Of course, Carolyn would be glad to accept contributions. They've made a lot of progress in their capital campaign, but I know they're not quite at their 100% funded goal. So if you're able to Google Metro Stage and go over to their website, they would be glad to accept any donation you might feel like making. So I think we all want to see Metro Stage start its performances as soon as possible. And I also know that the venue is added a mezzanine space that you can kind of see in this rendering here. So that'll allow for a lot more flexibility in different kinds of exhibitions and shows and gatherings. I know that they plan to be the permanent home for the Alexandria Film Festival. So I think there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff going on with this space. Long overdue, but better late than never. So I think we're all excited about that. Next, Montgomery Center. This is the other car. As if, we got two cars and two Austins. It's very confusing. But Montgomery Center is another long-awaited development, not started construction yet. This is a full block development. Some of you may be familiar with 327 rental apartments, 25,000 square feet of ground floor retail, 13,000 square feet of arts and cultural space as well. I understand an arts and cultural anchor has been identified here, but it's not ready for publication quite yet. The challenge facing this project is the capitalization in the financing markets. I can tell you firsthand, it's quite difficult. I've been doing this for about 30 years, and I've never seen a market for construction financing as difficult as this one. So it's a sort of a minor miracle and a testament to our neighborhood that we already have projects including Tide Lock and 425 Montgomery, that are built or under construction. And hopefully Montgomery Center will follow shortly. They do expect at this point to start in late first quarter or early second quarter of next year. And as soon as there's something they can announce publicly, I know that they will. Another project I want to highlight for you all, much smaller but an important space, is the arts and cultural space in 500 Montgomery Street. This is it's a kind of an art yoga studio. 532 Yoga is partnered with the NCO Creative, an arts consultancy that curates exhibitions of international artists to share to share this space in 500 Montgomery Street on the ground floor. The goal is to activate the space with weekly activities, and a grand opening is expected soon. I don't think they've have a specific date, but as you can see, this was taken during a tour of the Urban Design Advisory Committee this week, and so they're pretty close. So that space should be activated shortly. Okay, so with those updates on things that are in progress, I'm going to stop the sharing here, and we're going to turn over start the panel discussion, and ask some of our folks some questions and have them provide some updates on things that they've done. And we'll start with Suzanne from the Art League. So Suzanne, the Art League has enjoyed some pretty rapid fire success recently with both the opening of your location at Muse Condominiums last year and Slater's Annex not too long after that. It's just outside of Old Town North, but we'll count it. And while the Muse opening and your facility there was delayed due to COVID, you were eventually able to open with the assistance of financing structured by AEDP. The Slater's Annex came about in a completely different way, in a different period of time and much more quickly. So can you talk about the uniqueness of the circumstances surrounding those two successes and opening those facilities, and the arts programs that you'll be offering or already are offering at both those locations? You're on mute, Suzanne. Suzanne, you're on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you. Let's try that. Nope, you're still on mute. Suzanne, you're on mute still.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so
There you
sorry.
go. All right, we gotcha.
I apologize.
That's right.
So thank you, Ryan. And to answer your question, I think that what's interesting about our twin homes that we consider as part of the Arts District, actually the Slater's Annex was the project we had to identify and secure first before we could start the Muse. The Muse was a faster build because we changed the activities and the nature of what was going to go into that space to complement the 16,500 square foot warehouse space at Slater's Lane. We knew that to move ahead with the Muse location, which is 5,000 square feet with 3 active classroom studios, we would need to have a companion space, or else we wouldn't be able to continue our mission or finance the new space in the Arts District. So we actually worked through construction loan and financing through the IDA, the Alexandria IDA, and we had tremendous assistance from the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership folks. And once that was secured, we turned our sights back on to making adaptations to the original plan for occupancy at Muse. So when we were originally looking at Muse, we were going to take full responsibility for building out cold-lit warehouse style space at the retail ground floor at Muse, and then sign a 30-year lease. So that was the very broad strokes of the plan that we had moving forward. That changed. Obviously, you touched on the complication of COVID. Yes, that was a complication for us. But we were able to sit down with Alexandria Economic Development Partnership, and they took over, and now they are the owner of that space, and we are renting. And the rent is actually, although it functions as triple net, we're paying back for the construction of our art studios in that space. So that's how we reinvented that deal. For 800 Slaters, that space is actually more typical, that we built that space out through a construction loan, fundraising, and our own reserves. And we signed a 10-year lease there. And we pay a commercial triple net rent there. But together, we're able to have within walking distance almost our entire program supported. So as for what programs happen there, for those of you who've walked by Muse, you'll notice we have a pop-up gallery. So we have artwork displays that change every other month or so. We run painting classes, watercolor classes, multi-purpose classes in the larger Studio One. In Studio 2, we run our silkscreen printmaking and our darkroom photography class, which is seeing quite a renaissance. So we have a lot of photography students. And then the second studio is actually the jewel box on the corner, and that's where our stained glass studio is. So we also have multi-purpose mosaics and courses like that. So we've been operating there now for almost 18 months, and it has been very successful. We're very happy with it. Over at Slater's, that's where our ceramics department is. That's where our sculpture department is. Our children's classes are run at that location. Painting classes, jewelry. Most of our equipment-based classes are over at Slater's. And again, that was done on purpose because we knew it would be much easier to put in the fairly extensive venting systems that would need to be placed in order for us to operate a fairly large ceramics and sculpture department. So that's why we made some changes into our original design. But that opened about 6 months after Muse, and it's been going quite well. Though our one edict was based on our community service survey was we could never shut down. We had to keep our classes running. So a big thank you to CAR for allowing us to continue to go month to month at Montgomery Center while we brought this plan to fruition. So thank you for that.
So Suzanne, two things struck me as you were talking. The first is those deals are completely different, right? And
Yes.
they sound completely different than the struggles that we faced at Tide Lock with respect to, arts and cultural anchor space. Just coming out of the pandemic, which is, thankfully in the rear view, but that doesn't mean that every project doesn't still have challenges. And frankly, the circumstances are completely different. I'm not involved in any way directly or indirectly really with either, the venue project for Metro Stage or Austin's deal or Montgomery Center. But I would imagine that those are also very unique circumstances. So it's interesting that you were able to deal with two separate circumstances, for two separate properties, and that's a big accomplishment. So I think I think people can get frustrated with not seeing the arts and cultural district come together as quickly as we would all like. But I mean, those are two successes that happened in relatively close period of time. So I think that's pretty good. What advice would you give to me or Austin Holderness or anybody else that, in terms of dealing with these different, circumstances that your project might face? I mean, you guys kind of were pretty flexible.
Well, I think what we learned from that was we were actually very grateful that people hung in there with us. We weren't expecting to lose all of our reserves during COVID, and that really slowed us down. And the second circumstance was we were expecting to be able to finance our build out at Muse based on operating a few blocks away at Montgomery Center for completely neutral reasons. When that was sold for redevelopment, we knew that our original plan for financing wasn't going to work. And what we appreciated was that the Industrial Development Authority, Alexandria Economic Development Partnership, and CAR were with us through the process. That everyone had a dog in the fight to get us in there. And we knew that the neighborhood and the small area plan and planning and zoning, there had been a promise made that the cultural anchors of the Art League and Metro Stage would be there to in essence launch the cultural district. So we were very committed to making that happen. And early on, we knew that we couldn't have sacred cows when it came to how we approached our build out, that we were going to have to move things around. We had originally developed a plan for having a jewelry department at Muse, but when the construction market changed, we changed our plan. we changed what we were going to do. We moved locations, and we decided that the approach we needed to take was to have multi-purpose and flexible, non-built-in construction at Muse so that it could launch early and that we would have our footprint in there and we would have a means of keeping our student body engaged and connected. I would recommend that that for the Arts and Culture District, that when you're approaching nonprofits, it is the square footage is set at a minimum of 5,000 square feet. And that means that you are going to have a very specific kind of arts tenant. So I think thinking a little bit outside the box is a good idea. For the Art League, while we were large enough to finance 5,000 square feet, our programming requires 25,000 square feet. So we took a campus approach and we're grateful for that. We know that the work isn't over because we're on a 10-year lease in a commercial space, and that is most likely going to redevelop. So we hope that we can continue to look at new opportunities and stay flexible so we can look at this as a creative campus project for the Art League. And we're happy to talk to anybody who is thinking maybe their organization is ready and wants to look at Old Town North Cultural District. We're happy to tell them all the things not to do and all the things to do.
So I think I hear flexibility is key. And by the
Yeah.
way, I would invite any of the other panelists, please jump in if there's something that anybody says and you want to react to that, please do. I also would just ask you one more question before we maybe move on, or if anybody has a comment. And that would be, is everything that was in Montgomery Center now relocated to either Muse or Slater's, or are there still programs that you were offering at Montgomery Center that you're not offering at either of those two facilities? Or are you guys pretty much, kind of up and running for the programs that you would like?
So I can answer that yes and no. We saved all of our departments, but not all of the disciplines within the departments. For example, the Art League was one of the few art schools that offered table loom weaving and tapestry. The size and square footage that was allowable at Montgomery Center, because we built out that space when requirements for hallways and bathrooms were different. And we realized in mid-build that we were not going to be able to cobble together enough square footage to continue with a dedicated loom room. So we're looking at a way to save that program because it's one of the few programs on the East Coast, and we know we're going to have to partner probably with another nonprofit that doesn't work out of an urban center to do that. But our intention was that we would continue to offer the same number of classes and the same range of departments. On that front, we were able to deliver that.
Well, it's good. It sounds like, for the most part, you've been able to keep what you had and move forward, even if it's not in its totality, but there's hope for the future, which is, I think, great. If anyone would like to jump in, otherwise I'm happy to move on to Austin Holderness. Let's do that. So Austin, your 425 Montgomery Street apartment project is obviously well under construction. Can you give us an update on the projected completion and also the opening of City Dance, which is your arts and cultural anchor that's slated for your project, and maybe tell us a bit more about the kinds of programs and events that City Dance will hold at this location?
Sure, I'd be glad to, Ryan. We're Car Properties is kind of new to this area, so we bought 425 Montgomery about a year and a half ago, and then we're under construction for about a year. We're excited. We've come out of the ground. I think everybody hopefully has walked past the site and knows the site well. We're done with the concrete, and then we'll probably deliver the building at the end of next year. So probably in December of next year, we'll start having retail or apartments to lease, and then the retail will probably deliver in Q1, Q2 of 2027, and that would be with City Dance. So we feel really fortunate to partner with City Dance. They're a great organization. They have 5 locations around the DMV. We're trying to get Alex Norikowski, who runs it, is just a dynamo if you haven't met her. She's opening a location right now in Falls Church. And after that location is kind of up and running, then she's going to turn all of her attention to this location. So there'll be 4 to 5 studios. The plans kind of are moving around a little bit right now within the space, and a lot of dance classes. So I'm not a dance expert, but there's like contemporary jazz, African, hip hop. I'm sure both of my daughters know all those dances, but I do not. And then I think they do a really good job of partnering with local theater groups, choreographers, and other local artists within the area and bring them in and kind of have interactive sessions with the students that they teach. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a great addition to Old Town. And I think everybody's going to really enjoy the programming that Alex delivers at the City Dance.
That's also encouraging. I know, again, people have been waiting for some of these projects for what seems like a long time. You know, the small area plan was passed in 2017, and the Arts and Cultural District really conceived of in 2018 as part of that. And you know, to see, Art League delivering, hopefully Metro Stage soon, Tide Lock coming next, you right after. I mean, I think we're going to see a pretty quick succession in the span of 15, 18 months of some successes there. So I think that's good. And I think part of the idea, and Jeff, I'm sure you'll comment on this, of locating these arts and cultural organizations within proximity to one another is that they can collaborate. I know Carolyn at Metro Stage is excited about this partnership with, excuse me, the Alexandria Film Festival, right? So when she's not doing a live theater production, films can be shown there and other events can be shown there. So and Suzanne, I don't know what, the ability for Art League is to collaborate with the performing arts, but I imagine there's got to be some overlap. So hopefully this is what kind of knits together to create the art district that arts and cultural district that we're all hoping for.
I think having performing arts nearby and also the idea of education components with students, there are plenty of opportunities to partner on that, especially for kids.
I think, that's one thing that, I mean, if you live in Old Town North, you probably know this, but it's not readily apparent. But Old Town North is one of the few neighborhoods in Alexandria that has no churches and no schools in it. So the arts and cultural institutions that are there are coming in, are going to be kind of the backbone of these sort of, organizations that exist organically, for spaces and things like that, where you have a church hall or a school gymnasium or something like that, where events like that can take place, or organizations can come together. So we don't have that in Old Town North, and so I'm hoping that these facilities will serve that function as well. So
Yeah,
um,
to your point, Ryan, I mean, I'm sure the rehearsal space at City Dance could be used by other performing arts and they can leverage that space, you
yeah,
know.
I would think so. Let's turn it to Jeff. Jeff, I don't know if you want to comment on that. I do have a question for you to ask. Uh, but if you'd like to comment on City Dance or Art League, please do.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of kick off a little bit, and first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having this discussion, Ryan, because I think this is important for Old Town North, and I think the discussion, and Suzanne alluded to this a little bit when we were talking about the process, which is when we were doing the planning, which is how do we keep some of the art users that are there today, and how do we attract more? And one of the challenges in our city as we are thinking about these types of uses is how do they afford rents that are escalating at a very fast rate in our city? And so that is not a surprise to anyone on this conversation. And so one of our tools to do that is density. And I will say when we were creating this process, creating this program, creating this legislation, I think we all acknowledge that we were innovating. We did a bunch of research, and there aren't many examples in the country like this. There are some elements around the country that do pieces of this. But one of the things I think we acknowledged when we were approving the legislation was, hey, we're going to have to look at this again because we're going to learn things. And we've learned some things along the way, and I'll sort of come back to that. One of the things our council does for our department is they approve an overall work program for us, which is here are the things you're going to work on for the next 2 years. And one of the items they asked us to come back to city council with is to provide an update on the arts district. Do we need to amend things? Do we need to update things? How well is it working? Which is part of the conversation tonight. So we can come back to that. I will say and thank you, Ryan, for sort of kicking this off with the projects that are underway, because there is a lot happening, and Austin alluded to this, you alluded to this. There's a lot of projects that are going to be delivering. And so I think one of the things that's in addition to the projects that are there is having a critical mass of uses and activity along the two corridors that where the projects are happening. The other synergy that I hope happens along the way that I know we talked about during the planning process is Montgomery Park. A lot of these uses are fronting Montgomery Park. I hope there's an opportunity to spill out onto those and use those public spaces. So lots of things are happening. I will say the other thing as we think about, for me, when we think about the success of this arts district, there are really different players doing different roles. And the city has a legislative regulatory role of how do we incentivize these uses to be here. The private developers, obviously, like Austin, are building the buildings, and you, Ryan, are building the buildings. And then the tenants, and then the community groups. And in our research, my experience, when all of those groups start working together, something pretty powerful can happen. And I think everyone's playing a different role. And if we're all sort of implementing each of our roles, again, something pretty powerful, bigger than each individual organization can happen. So I hope we come back to that at some point. So lots more for me to talk about at some point, but I'll kick it back to you, Ryan.
Thank you. Jeff, I think that's a good point. I will say that the thing I hear over and over again from either alliance members or which can be residents or businesses or people who really either came to Old Town North, purchased there, are renting there, businesses who brought their businesses there, folks like me who invested capital in redeveloping property there, is the promise. I think Suzanne used that word, the promise of the Arts and Cultural District, right? And it's I think there's maybe a good bit of impatience, or maybe people have been patient enough, but it's some frustration that there hasn't been more action, and people see unfortunately kind of what's gone on down maybe at the torpedo factory, where people know that it could be better, and a lot of people have a lot of good ideas, but there hasn't been a lot of progress, at least not visible progress, made there yet. And I think people are maybe getting cynical that there's a lot of planning and study and not as much action and doing. And I think even Mayor Wilson said before he left office that the torpedo factory's kind of been studied to death for 10 or 20 years. And I think nobody wants to see that in Old Town North. And so I think the focus on implementation is I think warranted. You mentioned the some of the planning efforts, though. So the long-term work plan that's coming up for 2026, it's going to look at the Arts and Cultural District. What do you expect to come out of that effort?
So I think one of the things in our report back to the Planning Commission and City Council is their instruction to us is take a look at the legislation. Is it working? What's working and what's not? And I think that is our charge. And Suzanne alluded to this, but I will say one of the lessons learned that we had in this process is delivering a space that's unfinished is a big barrier for arts tenants from a cost, timing, implementation perspective. So I will just say that is a lesson learned. And I think as we think about moving forward in legislation, I think that's something we're going to need to address, because it is a barrier for an arts user to come in and not only do a tenant fit out, but fit out the space for heating and cooling and the interior of the space. So that is a lesson learned that I think we will be applying moving forward.
Okay, fair enough. I'd like to, by the way, remind everybody that if you have a question for any of the panelists, please do put it in the chat. And assuming we have time in the last 20 or 30 minutes of the session, which is scheduled to go to about 8 p.m., I'd be happy to ask those questions and see if we can get them answered here. So why don't we turn to Dina next? Dina Stoner, you wear a lot of hats, but you're one of the folks that I think we really wanted to have here because you provide a little bit of an outside perspective in that you've looked outside of Old Town North, and you've studied other areas where arts and cultural districts have been successful and maybe where they haven't been. So, in addition to your role on as a board member on the Council for Traditional Arts, um, you know, you've had this opportunity to research other areas and see what works, what doesn't, what's a catalyst for redevelopment, what isn't. So what have you learned from what other people are doing, and what worked and what didn't? I think both from a cultural and arts perspective, but also, economically. And before you answer that, I just got a note here. Please send your questions, if you have them, on the chat to the host, which is me, and then I can organize them and ask here toward the end of the session. So anyway, with that said, Dina, what works, what doesn't, what can we do here?
Well, I have a PowerPoint, but I'm going to ask you to hold it so I could just be more conversational, and then we can put it up if we want to.
Let me know when you're ready.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you for focusing on this. Some of the things I'm going to say reflect what's already been said. But let me mention how I did this and why. I have a background in rural economic development, and so I've been focused on rural areas and rural areas that have been successful in the arts. But I am an Alexandria resident, and so I have been frustrated as I've watched the torpedo factory struggles. Enough said, since most of the people on this panel probably know this very well. But it became clear to me that I do not think the torpedo factory is going to succeed without a real focus on cultural arts and ecosystems. And that's what you're building here. And so I decided to look at the literature. And as Jeff said, you are experimental. There is almost nothing in the literature that in the even academic literature in the United States, if you look, where it is in Europe, in Denmark, Sweden, the Amsterdam, or in the Dutch areas, and some in Germany. So I decided, all right, I've traveled all over the United States for business, been in cities where this has happened, and working, let's take a look at the cities where we know it's happening. So I looked at the following cities for examples of things that they seem to have in common. I did not look intensely at Santa Fe, but Santa Fe is the granddaddy of this in the United States. Those of you who've been there know that. I looked at some cities that are more recent, and that is Grand Rapids, Michigan, Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, even Asheville, which had this terrible catastrophe, and it's the arts area that is building back Asheville, if you watch. And the newest one that is doing it very strategically is Miami. Each doing it in their own way, but they have some common factors, and I thought I would just mention those. If you want to put it up, I'll just and so people can see it. That way I can go fast.
Yep.
Every single one of them have some sort of an art school. It's either an art school, a dance school, some sort of a school. And the reason why that is so important, it builds a culture for the arts, understanding the arts, an audience for the arts, and it brings people in. It's why the Art League cannot, if we're to be successful, and thank goodness for the dance school, leave this cultural area. It's critical, it's important. They have an involved citizen group, often with a philanthropic arm, and they sustain themselves and help keep the focus on economic development as an arts and culture thrust. And it's very different in urban areas when you have a thrust that is to bring back blighted areas than it is for an area like Alexandria. It has to be an economic development thrust that is the focus. So, what do we mean by that? Well, Jeff mentioned it, and a couple others. You have to have density. Now, I'm not talking about density like the high rises you guys are building, that sort of density. I'm talking about density of programming, constant programming to bring outside dollars in. Because in the end, what we want this district to do is to build businesses and tax revenue for the city so they can use it for other kinds of things. You want to bring it in. And you want policies that support that, policies that support creatives, affordable housing that is helpful to creatives. You want performing spaces where they can practice. Some of this you're already mentioned, but this is an element that these cities all have. And there are others I can mention as well. You need public transportation and walkability. I know you're working on the walkability. I was just thrilled to see the walkability part that you're doing. But it's a question of, could we take the Alexandria trolley and move it through that area where people can get on and off, so students can get to the art league, students can get to the dance school, you can bring people in, and then if there's happens to be a restaurant or whatever that comes up, that it helps that area as well. So you need that capability to get people in walkability and some sort of transportation. You need a broad definition of arts, culinary, historical, digital arts. Savannah is an example of the digital arts. Their art school and businesses there are just experts in digital arts. They get an international clientele using their arts. Then maybe one of the harder things is some dedicated funding. Most of these cities have a portion of their hospitality taxes or whatever that actually supports the next thing. And the next thing is a city office that is a one-stop shop that has MOUs that cut across departments, that has the authority right to the top so they can cut across departments, so that if you want to put a sculpture up and you can fit within an MOU, you don't have to go through all the kind of permitting because that's already been done, for example. And there's many examples of that. Those are the commonalities that all of these cities have. And you are starting to have a good many of them. But I want to go back to the density issue.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Because actually, I agree with you there, and I think probably some of the panelists here will also agree with you that, and I swear this is not. I did not set up Dina to give these answers. She sent me her PowerPoint request this morning. Okay, so we are not collaborating here in any way. But I will tell you that a lot of what you've outlined here are things that are either in progress or things that the Old Town North Alliance in particular is advocating for. I'd like to just highlight a few of those so people are aware of them, because a lot of these things happen behind the scenes, and people may not be aware of them. And I think that's part of what this is about, is letting people know what's going on and what these groups are doing on their behalf. And I'd like any of the panelists, please, to chime in with your thoughts on these. But art and music school, obviously we have the Art League, City Dance. So we've got a couple good examples there. Involved Citizen Group, again, the Old Town North Alliance has been around for about as long as the Small Area Plan. We'd love new members, by the way. If you're on this and you're not a member, we're a membership-only organization. So you help us pursue these goals in Old Town North. Obviously, Notice, the Civic Association, is highly involved, and we work well with them. And the Old Town North Community Partnership, Margaret Townsend's group, representing the small businesses. I think we all, try to pull on the same oar to make that happen. So I think you've got that. The density, you had a comment on that. Let's get back to that in a second. Affordability, I think, is tough everywhere. I can tell you firsthand, and I'm sure Austin can as well, construction costs are not going down. Our
Right.
project in particular over the last 5 years has seen a massive cost increase. And although I will say that I know several of the projects, including the Tide Lock project, are providing affordable housing on site, and of course the arts and cultural anchor spaces that are being provided are being provided rent free. Even though, as Jeff alluded, maybe building those spaces out, requires some additional assistance. And I think Suzanne experienced that with her build out of her space at Muse. So those are still some challenges yet that at least have been identified that maybe we weren't aware of, or the city planning and zoning department wasn't aware of 7 or 8 years ago when this was originally conceived, and certainly pre-COVID. Walkable. I mean, as you alluded to, I mean, the planning and zoning department gets a lot of credit for specifying widened sidewalks. And I mean, if you look at the sidewalks that are being put in front of Tide Lock, or the sidewalks that were put in front of Muse or Venue, they're much more pedestrian friendly than the old sidewalks that were done in the 80s when this area was originally built out. So a lot of credit for forward thinking there. There are provisions for buses and other things to take people to the metro or down to King Street. So I think that's coming. The funding, the funding thing is tough, right? I mean, at the end of the day, all of this stuff needs money, and the city has a ton of priorities. So I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges on your list here. And I would totally agree with, in fact, the Alliance had requested, the city appointing a project manager, and we've been fortunate to work with Catherine Caraway, who's a colleague of Jeff Farner's, who's been identified as someone that can help us work with the various departments to see some of these things that we want to see for the Arts and Cultural District come together. And we'll talk about those in a little bit. But so I think a lot of these things you've identified are things that either the Alliance or Notice or Old Town North Community Partnership, all of us are working on together. So I'd like to come back to some of those. Does anyone want to comment on some of Dina's points here? Because I think she makes a lot of really good ones.
I would just add maybe one, Dina, you had mentioned places like Santa Fe, like Savannah, and I think in Savannah maybe you're referring to SCAD and some of the
Right.
reflow that happened in Canyon Road in Santa Fe.
Right.
I think both of those have one, particularly Savannah, happened over time, and Santa Fe as well, but they're also connected. And so there becomes this critical mass where there's enough there that then it starts generating identity, which then starts attracting more arts users. So I think Ryan did a great job of identifying what's in the queue. And I think it's going to change the brand. I personally think it's going to change the brand and identity of Old Town North because we're going to have more users there. And so as we have more users, we're going to attract more people, we're going to attract more activity, and the identity of Old Town North is going to change and add to what's already there. We haven't talked about the power plant redevelopment either. That's going to add as well. So I think there's a lot of things in the queue, and I hear the frustration about time. We share that. But there's lots of challenges of market and lots of things happening. And, Ryan talked about cost of construction and financing, and we hear you on time. And so I think working with Ryan and others, I think we can figure out a way to hopefully stitch some of the things that are in there together. But critical mass and sort of this element of building over time.
If I could add to your comments, Jeff, it's what I mean by density. It's density of programming. And the reason I wanted to just add a little more about that, it is intense marketing to bring in people to participate in these things in the cultural district. But there's another piece of this that is common to all these cities. And Jeff, you will have, and others will have probably examples of this, but I can give some. It is important and often counter to the general thought. Mostly we in urban areas, to be fair, you want to spread money like butter, thin. In this case, in order to succeed, the resources, attention, and money needs to be really put into this kind of dense cultural and art district because it spreads out. I am a resident of Del Rey. We have as much at stake to have this successful because it will spread out. And so all of a sudden bookstores pop up in other less expensive areas of the city and other things happen. And when people come in to experience the area where the activities are dense, whether they're festivals, art shows, programming, dance shows, they might also come out to dinner here in Del Rey, but it spreads out. And the art investment also spreads out in that communities begin to build community art kinds of things. But it is important that in a arts and culture district that there is quality. And so when I say density, I am not trying to suggest that we be selective or that we don't want art spread across the city. It is a strategy that if it works, it spreads across the city.
And it's interesting you say that, Dina, because I think of this as, I mean, one of the early things under our founder and original president, Agnes Artemel, she worked with Winstanley Architects, who's working with Metro Stage now on the Arts and Cultural Walk Master Plan. And if anyone here attending has seen what that looks like, we have it displayed on a large sort of banner that we usually have it at Old Town North events, where people can come up and check it out and look at it. And it's a plan for where all of these opportunities can exist within Old Town North, frankly, starting in Old Town proper at the Torpedo Factory and coming up Union Street and then kind of snaking through Orinoco Bay Park and then up North Fairfax Street, which is what the Planning and Zoning Department defined as one of the major spines of the Arts and Cultural District. And if you can, I've always said that the mission of the Alliance is connecting the dots, right? So, you can have something at Muse with Suzanne and up at Slater's. You can have something at Tide Lock. You can have something at Montgomery Center or Metro Stage or City Dance at 425 Montgomery Street. But unless you have something to bring it all together, right? And that can be public art, that can be signage, that can be to show people where to go, that can be public art on private land, public art on private land. It can be events, right? The Old Town North Alliance, right. The Chock-a-Block event annually. We hope to do more events. We hope to do nighttime art projections on buildings. I mean, there are a lot of ideas that are out there that can really make this all come together. And I think that's what you're talking about for density. And then you make an interesting place and people want to be there. Businesses grow, residents come in, it's a virtuous cycle, right?
Awesome. And the other thing that is extremely important is that we measure it. We measure the increased resources that come into the city. That's important, metrics, because it will happen, but we need to have the metrics.
Austin, you have your hand raised. I don't know if you did that on purpose or not.
I did. I guess when we say the density of uses, I think when you think about what works well with arts, it's kind of like nightlife, activity, cafes, restaurants. I mean, I used to live in DuPont Circle and we'd walk over to 14th Street. We go to the Studio Theater. You go afterwards, you go grab a drink or you grab dinner beforehand. The Anthem at the Wharf integrated with all the retail there, the arena stage close to the wharf, walking distance. So I think the arts is central to it, but there's supporting stuff that from a planning perspective, the city should really encourage as well. So as many restaurants and cafes and bars, they just kind of go together and they make a dynamic environment. So I think it's diversity of uses beyond arts as well, especially retail with F&B.
Well, and I can tell you just as a small microcosm at the Tide Lock project, some word has kind of sprinkled out about the Italian car museum that was planned there, and people were interested in renting cafe space next to an interesting arts and cultural user like that. So they do go hand in hand, right? You can't just say, oh, well, put a cafe in the bottom floor of my office building or my apartment building because it doesn't make it any different than anywhere else, right? It creates the there that Jeff was talking about, a few minutes ago, especially if you get, as Dina was talking about, this density of uses across.
And, and arts need to be defined broadly, including culinary arts.
So yeah, so what is it? Give us some examples of that.
Well, it can be restaurants. It can be the development of crafts. It can be historical artifacts that are artfully displayed and storytelling. It should be broad, but one of the keepers of the flame of how we define that is a community group that keeps the focus very much on that.
I can tell you that the Alliance is trying to do just that. We're not the Civic Association, we're not the Small Business Association. We're sort of trying to bring everybody together to focus on that. So again, I didn't prompt that, but I mean I know the Alliance and our active members and board members would be very happy to kind of pursue that goal in partnership with the city and others. So anyway, I second that. Suzanne, you've been quiet for a while. Yeah, I see you're enjoying the greenery there in the Botanic Garden. Maybe you have any thoughts?
Well, I'll say that the Art League was a presence at Montgomery Center for almost 30 years. And there were a lot of small business. We were in the center core of the building, and there were a lot of independent small businesses that circled. And I believe that part of the reason why those tenants would stay in that area is because of the synergy between the students and keeping them in business and visiting. In fact, when we did our community survey within our student body, one of the questions that they asked were, what are the amenities? They wanted to know what other arts uses were going to be in the neighborhood, but specifically, is there a cafe? I want to grab some lunch with a friend after class. So I think the idea, to Dina's point, that it spreads out. And I think that for the most part, we've always found that having a large student body will attract a variety of other businesses that are able to move into small spaces and make their business more successful than just moving into a residential area. So I do think that that's one part of what can happen in Old Town North, because not every space is designated that way. And I think we've discovered in our process that because most of the spaces that have been designated as part of the, let's say, an arts anchor, an arts tenant within a build, that the arts tenants are a little bit held back by if they take the keys of that space and they try to borrow against the value of that property, you can't get enough value because it's been encumbered to an arts use. So that's a stumbling block for a construction loan. But I think that maybe taking a look at, okay, expanding the idea of what's going to be the ultimate draw and value of this. It's just another way. I'm not sure what tools can be brought to bear on that, but I do think that arts are a driver, an economic driver. And if that's the focus, the focus originally obviously was to take on the battle of escalation for arts groups. But there's still the idea of how do you make sure that small businesses can stay too? And I think hand in glove, small business and arts groups have more in common in terms of how they're surviving. Their survival is dependent on advancement programs from their communities.
Well, I can tell you this. I think intuitively we all knew that when COVID happened and everybody didn't go into the office in downtown DC anymore, and then all the cafes and restaurants and things that were dependent on those people, going from their homes to their offices downtown, and then they closed, is just a kind of a related concept to what you're talking about here. Except in this case, we're talking about a mixed use neighborhood in Old Town North, where if you're coming to an art class, you want to know where you can get a sandwich or a coffee, or a delicious fried chicken sandwich at Woo Boy, for example. Maybe that's what I had for lunch today, maybe not. So I think that all does go together. I can tell you that the it was, I think, inspired on the part of planning and zoning to come up with this arts and cultural district to begin with, because that's one reason why I invested our dollars into the Tide Lock development. And I can tell you that people feel as though the arts density bonus that's given is a handout, and I can tell you that that's not the case, because without the interest that's created by an arts and cultural district to differentiate your apartment building or condo building or whatever compared to any other place in the city that you could build, or frankly in the region, that's a differentiating factor. That's good, right? I can also tell you that the economics of taking old buildings and turning them into something else that is current is not favorable right now. It's very, very expensive and only getting worse. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it would be easier to knock down old buildings, which is less environmentally friendly and other things, and start new. And that's not what, certainly that's not what the Venue Project did. That's not what Tide Lock Project is doing. And in some cases, it's not possible. A lot of people think you can take any building and just repurpose it from office to residential or residential to hotel or whatever. And that's just not how that works. The physical realities are different, and the economic realities make that especially challenging. So when you put an arts and cultural district, give people an incentive to make an interesting place, I think it differentiates and creates an interesting place in the city. So Jeff, I don't mean to be, I'm not a planner like you, so you probably, maybe I'm reading from your playbook, but.
I just want to add, because I was going to jump in after Austin made the comment about different uses, and Suzanne, I think, said that as well. I think as we think about the vitality and success of this district, it is capturing people before and after they are using the art space. And that is going to benefit the district, because people want that experience. They want that opportunity, whether it's a coffee shop or a restaurant or another opportunity. So how do we have those opportunities in and around the arts uses? So as we think about the success of the arts district, it is related to the success of the retail as well, sort of in and around these corridors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd like to give anyone a chance to sort of chime in here with any closing thoughts. We've got about 23 minutes or so left till the end of the session, and we do have a handful of questions that have come in. I'd like to try to get to those. So if anyone has any closing thoughts, I don't want to stop the conversation early. I think it's been a good conversation. Hopefully a lot of information has been shared with folks who may not know some of what's going on behind the scenes, because it's not eminently visible. So please, if everyone wants to chime in with a closing comment, please do, or we can move to questions.
I have one closing comment, and it's just a comment that we need to be aware of. This could look as elitist to some parts of the city. It's just important that the arguments that are made, where they understand the spin-offs for the entire city, it will spin off. If this is successful, it will spin off other kinds of arts and businesses into the rest of the city. So the thing with city council and politicians, they're always concerned about appropriating, spreading the resources. This is a case where you need to make this successful and then fund the spinoffs.
I think if the Old Town North Arts and Cultural District succeeds, I don't think anyone's going to complain. That's my fervent hope, because I think it will be, and I think we're on the cusp of that, to be honest. I think the tone here I think that's important is that while there's been some frustration, there's a lot of progress that's going to come quickly, I think, in the next year and a half, and and hopefully that will just build on itself. And I think Jeff was making that point earlier. So Austin, you get to talk a lot, so I don't know if you want to give any more thoughts about your project. You're next in line after a Tide Lock, so if you want to get people excited about your apartments or city dance, now's the time.
No, we're really excited. I mean, we love the neighborhood. We feel fortunate to have the site and be a part of this community. I think we're really excited with building on what I said earlier, the retail that supports the arts. I think we have two great retailers. So 4 or 5 Coffee is coming in, and they have a robust sandwich offering and lunch offering and breakfast offering. And then we have Grazi Nona, who's a great operator, an Italian place that has great pizza. We'll have takeaway pizza, great sit down, great bar scene. So I think we're laying the foundation right now to support a lot of the art uses. And then when you layer in City Dance on top of that, I think it's going to be a great combination for the community.
That's fantastic. I didn't have dinner, so I when you had me at Grazia Nonna.
It'll be nice with the Italian car museum around the corner. They'll
See,
go well together.
that's one possibility. We're working on a second one. Um, why don't I turn it over to some questions that we've gotten in here? The first question is from someone who wants to know about yesterday on the UDAC tour, the Urban Design Advisory Commission. Some folks suggested banners to identify the Old Town North Arts and Cultural District. And there was a suggestion that the 3 community groups work together on this. The person that asked this question, I know her, and she might not be surprised to know that we are already working on this. Catherine Caraway, who's participating as an audience member on this session, is working with us to identify the opportunity to do that. That's something that the Alliance has talked about for a couple years. And perhaps our partners at the city will feel there's enough there now to start to put signage up and banners to demarcate the district and tell people what's imminently coming. But that's something we're working on. So thanks for that question. We had a question about the torpedo factory failing or risk of failing. That comment that I made, I don't think I was implying that it was failing. I think just that the torpedo factory had not been worked on since the 80s in any meaningful way, and there's a move to redevelop it and kind of expand its potential at the southern end, in obviously at the foot of King Street, but would be the southern end of an arts and cultural district that comes straight up into Old Town North. So not that it's failing, but that it could be so much more. And I personally served on the task force, the torpedo factory task force that studied that and made recommendations to the city manager. So I think people are, again, hoping for progress there, concrete progress they can see, and not, as the mayor said, the former mayor, endless studies. So another question from someone who actually has an art gallery and event space, and they're looking to expand. He's asking about spaces that are opening up and what other spaces might be available in the Arts and Cultural District. I think one thing that's interesting, and to Dina's point about one-stop shop, so as far as I've been able to determine so far, there's been a lot of sort of disconnected effort in terms of who's doing what within the Arts and Cultural District. And one example of that would be AEDP, who's done great work to get Suzanne open. In the spring, they put out a expressions of interest request for folks who might be interested in space in the Arts and Cultural District. And then I was surprised to receive an email today from someone that forwarded it to me that essentially said that all the Arts and Cultural District spaces are full or there aren't any opportunities. And I wasn't aware of that. That email caught me by surprise. And so I think maybe having someone to coordinate, and find out what's coming up, what's available, and keep that list open, which I think AEDP is going to do. But as of right now, there's nothing imminent. I think it just speaks to the coordination between, the marketing arm, which I think AEDP did a great job soliciting these expressions of interest, but then finding out and how to match them up with projects that are coming down the road. There's obviously, as Jeff mentioned, a large redevelopment of the power plant site coming, hopefully in the next, I don't even want to say because I don't know, but hopefully sooner than later. So Jeff, do you have comments on finding opportunities for arts and culture tenants to locate, sooner than later?
Yeah, I would, if you can, reach out to our ADP Economic Development folks. If not, send an email to me and I will make sure that we connect you. So first of all, thank you for your interest in the city, and we will make sure that we can get the right information to you. So
We have a comment from someone asking about transportation and parking in Old Town North. Currently the comment is the streets have limited parking in OTN. Where will people park their cars? The Dash bus system does go through Old Town North with stops on Montgomery. Obviously there's a lot of transportation management planning that goes into any of the developments that are going on. This person doesn't have a good opinion of a trolley like King Street, but certainly worried about walkability and transportation. Jeff, do you want to hit on that at all, or?
yeah, I'll just touch that a little bit. So I think one of the things with new projects, and Austin and Ryan are obviously participating in this, is there's a requirement to provide on-site parking for the new units. And so they're doing that, as well as some of the retail space. So as we think about new projects mitigating their impact, they're doing that on site with parking. In terms of parking management, as the Arts District evolves, we can look at other parking restrictions or limitations, and there is a process in our city to do that. On King Street is a great example of how we evolve and change over time based on business needs. So projects mitigate their impact on site, and then as we look at sort of street impact, there's a process to do that.
Um, and then we did get another question about that related to affordable, easy transportation access to the metro. So I imagine all those different transportation methods, and the city's looking at those to sort of weave it all together and make sure that people can
Yes.
get to the metro, can get in and out of Old Town North and around Old Town North to other parts of the city or the metro area.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. I have a question here. A lot of these are directed at you, Jeff. I'm sorry. I guess it's because you're the only the city government person on the panel.
Excellent.
Sorry. Let's see. Where's this question? Um, one second. So it was about, um, given the lessons learned, what is the city doing to help other art and cultural entities move through the barriers that were identified in this panel for projects underway? Let's see, the revised project. Let me a second, just read this here. I think maybe this got a little mixed up, but basically, what can the city do to help some of these, help move forward through some of these barriers that we've talked about here?
Yeah, I think really good question. I think that is the reason that we are looking at this program, and we have to take it back to council and report things that we need to change and revise. So that's going to be next year. I think in the short term, and I hope Ryan would agree with this, I think our goal is to help fill these art spaces, including Ryan's. And so we are willing to be flexible where we can be, as long as it's meeting the intent of the SMARIA plan and zoning ordinance. So trying to be as flexible as we can to get uses in, and then trying to take something back to council early next year, to reflect the changes that I think we need to make to reflect what we've learned in the past couple of years.
So I've got another question here that's very interesting, and I think you all might have an opinion on this. So the question is, how can artists and arts organizations who are not suited to be arts anchors yet, but are already a presence in the city, how can the city support the density of programming in the Old Town North Arts District? I think it's kind of an incubator type question, right? If you're not quite ready to take on 5,000 feet or 8,000 feet or 13,000 feet, how can you grow into that space? What kind of incubator, smaller space might be available or could be made available to, those kinds of entities?
I'll take a quick stab at that. I think, and then maybe others can add to this. I think the real challenge in Old Town North and our city is the affordability of the spaces that are available. And so one of the things that we are doing right now as a department, we're looking at the Duke Street corridor, and there's a lot of small businesses and more affordable space. And one of the things we're looking at is how do we help small businesses who are entrepreneurs start in that more affordable space. And so we're going to be taking some recommendations back to City Council in January on that. So it's really affordability and sort of transitioning, whether you're a food truck and transitioning to brick and mortar or opening in that case an arts user space, it's really getting affordability. So I think that's a really big thing. And candidly, it's a huge challenge in our city. So
Do you think the Torpedo Factory, I mean, given that there are smaller artist studios and things like that that make up a portion of the space there, do you think that has a role in this kind of incubator
it
concept?
it absolutely has a role, and it was really one of the intents of that location is to have more affordable space, because that's how we get these types of users in spaces like Old Town North.
And Suzanne, do you see any of your programs potentially spinning off to the point where they become, I know you have departments that do different things, right? You mentioned, for example, your weaving department or program. I mean, do you see, sort of the programs you offer sort of becoming bigger as interest grows in them and potentially need for more space, or how, I mean, or the ability to maybe collaborate with smaller kind of arts and cultural entities that might have an ability to work with you, but and then get launched on their own? Or what do you think about that idea?
I think the one of the potentials of the arts and cultural district, like revamp, now that we were going through this sort of learning phase, what the Art League has experienced, because the Art League is actually quite old as an arts organization. It was founded in 1954, and it looks very, very different than how it started. Some of our departments and some of our art forms, we've spawned other arts organizations that are interested in getting a little bit more in depth, where we offer a wide variety of classes. We've seen groups and founding artists that were part of the Art League find space and opportunity in other communities, Arlington, other parts of the city, and start a more intensive, smaller nonprofits focused on one particular art form. I do think that the Art League, I imagine that the space needs that we have now are going to look radically different in 10 years, but I still believe we're going to have a large footprint, because right now for the Art League, we've seen this as a 10-year solution, and that we were intensely interested in being an anchor of the Old Town North Arts District. We really didn't think we would be the first project in. But part of the reason why we worked so hard to make it work with a commercial property is we knew that if we didn't take space in the arts district, then smaller groups and other members of our arts community would not feel empowered to go ahead and move into it. The city, although it's a very small city, 160,000 people live here, that is not a huge budget to support the arts. But we worked with planning and zoning for years before even the concept of what an arts and culture district. We had a lot of listening tours with them. And AEDP took this on as an economic project. I think that there are opportunities for the Art League to partner with groups and have pop-up experiments. I think that the 5,000 square feet, it's too big for incubating groups, but it is much too small for us. So I think that the idea of having some flexibility in that magic number may be a way to kickstart new opportunities and new spaces in the arts district that are not available today. So I think it's quite possible
Well,
that we could find ways to help.
I think actually this goes back to a theme that I was discussing with you early on, Suzanne, which is that each circumstance for these projects for each of the art spaces is a little different.
Yep.
You certainly have different experiences at Slater's Lane than you did at Muse, right? I can tell you that, for example, and I know this just from having, been in the space the other day, Metro Stage, which is obviously everybody wants to see them open as soon as possible. And there's been talk about, well, if they won't open, maybe somebody else should go in there. Well, I can tell you, having gone in that space, that it's designed to be a theater, right?
Right.
You can't put just anything into that space. Levine Music was the original arts and cultural anchor designated for Tide Lock, and unfortunately, they bowed out of the project for a variety of reasons. But you can't just turn that space into something else. It has to be appropriate both for the use that's around it and then the physical space that's been constructed for it. So I think finding flexibility among the various spaces is tough, right? You can't
Yeah.
build a theater and then expect it to be something else. So I think that's a challenge.
I just want to say that every city that has been very successful at this does have an incubator space, and it's not always in the art district itself. It is those um, entities that use the incubator space are brought into the district in the kinds of programming that happens in the district. Small dance venues, other kind where their practice space may not be in the district, it's in the arts district itself. And so I'm glad to hear Jeff talk about having an incubator space in a less high rent area, but the programming imperative is to bring those groups into the district. And now that's programming and marketing.
Well, and I think that speaks to your point about coordination and one-stop shop, right? Because if a group like the Old Town North Alliance can't really be involved we're a community group dedicated to this neighborhood. We can't be involved in, say, an incubator space set up in Del Rey or the West End or Eisenhower, right? I mean, it's outside of our purview, and I think that's the role, hopefully, that the city can fill to help with that and coordinate with that. Or potentially a group like AEDP, right? They've sent out the expressions of interest. Hopefully I know they've gotten 60 or 70 responses. I'm not sure exactly who responded. I'm not sure they were all qualified necessarily for a certain type of use or a certain space, but I think those are opportunities to coordinate, to your point, Dina.
If the city is looking for space, there are a lot of obsolete office buildings right now that are trading for next to nothing. I think it would be hard to find those in Old Town, but if you expand the boundaries and are looking for that, I think now's the time to look because older office buildings are trading at distressed pricing right now.
Well, and we had, Austin, to that point, we had a question come in just a second ago. I'll just read it. It says the city has a lot of unused retail space. If this is true in the arts district, why not rent these spaces to starter arts users at lower rates, subsidized by a city tax break? So I don't think it's true necessarily in Old Town North. I don't see a lot of empty retail in Old Town North, but within the city of Alexandria, that may be the case. I don't follow the small retail market myself, but certainly that's an idea and not, related to what you were just describing, Austin. So we have one other, so this is high-minded stuff. Let's get back to something that everybody's worried about. They were worried about it when we did a forum a year and a half ago about the arena, and that's transportation and parking. So we got another parking question. Where are all these people going to park? So I'd like to answer part of that, and then maybe Jeff, you can share what you think from a planning perspective, and Suzanne, you can tell me where your people park. But Tide Lock, for example, took a 700 space garage that was all office use, right, and turned it into a garage with just as many spaces that can now be used not just during the day, but at night by residents, right? So you have office workers who still sometimes come into the office and leave at 5 or 6 p.m. And then you have residents who come home. And so you have this ability to more fully utilize, 700 parking spaces. There's a very large parking garage under Canal Center. There's a parking garage behind the office building where One Life Fitness is. I'm blanking on the address. There's actually quite a bit of structured parking in Old Town North. There's a very good amount of retail parking that's under the Gables Old Town North building. So I know parking is definitely a consideration, Jeff. When you consider Old Town North, maybe you could speak to that a little bit to ease people's fears about that with these new arts and cultural users coming in the next year or so.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned exactly what I was going to say, Ryan, which is there's a lot of available underground parking or structured parking in Old Town North, and part of it is as we think about how parking in Old Town works, getting wayfinding, directing people, directing employees there as well, which is something I think we do pretty successfully in Old Town. So the street parking is more for users and visitors. So I think it's a matter of management, not supply. And I think we have some good tools to do that.
I am cautiously optimistic that you're right. I see a lot of parking. I've never had trouble parking in Old Town North. I've been there at all different times of the day, weekends, nights. Granted, the developments aren't complete yet, but I find a lot of available parking, and I expect that's going to continue. So we have about 1 minute until we're finished. I'm sorry that we wrapped up on something as run of the mill as parking, but it's definitely a practical consideration. I know something that people are concerned with. I'd like to thank you all for participating. I'd like to thank everyone who attended and the questions. We will be posting a recording of this on the Old Town North Alliance's website. A couple other reminders. I would love for everyone, if you're not a member, to join the Old Town North Alliance if you're an organization or as an individual. The only way that we can put on events, coordinate things like signage, and work with our city partners is if we have the funds to do so. It's very affordable to join. So please email our executive director, Sarah Almy, at director@otnalliance.org if you're interested in joining. We will be coming to you if you don't come to us looking for members. So we hope you'll come to us and make our job a little easier. I also just want to put up one more time the flyer for the volunteer cleanup event that we're having on Saturday from 10 to 12. Please come out and help clean up the trail. This is a really great event and important for everybody to help keep the trail clean, which we all know is a huge resource for Old Town North. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We look forward to doing this again in the near future and the success of the Arts and Cultural District.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good night.